Welcome back to another story time with the Chittenango Landing Canal Boat Museum. I'm Miss Lindsay, and today we are continuing with Minnie the Mule and the Erie Canal. Chapter 7, Passing Amsterdam. We are close to Amsterdam. When we reach this point, we are in Dutch country. Captain John pointed to the rich green fields they were passing. Now you will see some big cities, bigger than any you have ever visited. Are we going to stop in Amsterdam? I want to hear more about the robbery there that Captain O'Malley told us about. No, maybe on our way back. We will only stop to lock through when we have to. I want to get as close to Schenectady as we can today. Cahos is just a short way from there, and I want to get that stretch behind us as fast as we can. Why? What is so special about Cahos? She was disappointed that they were not going ashore in Amsterdam. Already she could see the factories along the shoreline, and the smoke from their stacks rose lazily in the distance. Mama said that Amsterdam was where you bought the pearl buttons you brought back last year. She says they make them there. Those buttons look so pretty on the dress that Mama made me last winter. I love the way they have different colors in them. Cahos starts the 16 locks that we will be going through. They are all within about 3.5 miles. We will be dropping close to 200 feet in sea level down that stretch, and it takes us almost a whole day to get through all of them, with good luck. Really? Sarah was impressed. She had grown accustomed to locking through as they floated down the canal, but every lock was different. Some of the gatekeepers were nice and some of them were mean. There were gatekeepers that seemed to think only about the quarter they collected from them for their service. Her father tamped the tobacco down in his pipe with his thumb. It was early afternoon, and Sarah was peeling potatoes for their next meal as she sat next to him. Her mother was hanging clothes on the line between the cabin and the bow stable. Once we lock through a Cahos, it won't be long before we pasture the mules and join the tow down the Hudson River. Before we reach Albany, though, we have to go through 27 locks, all within a 15-mile stretch. When will we get to Albany, Pa? Tomorrow? Sarah was excited at the thought of the journey down the Hudson River. Her father had told her stories about what it was like last winter. From Amsterdam, we pass Cranesville, Rotterdam, and Scotia before we come to Schenectady and go around it. We might tie up there for a night. Her father stretched to ease his tired muscles. But when will we get to Albany? Sarah persisted. Maybe the day after tomorrow, if we do not run into any bad weather. He pointed to a barge coming towards them. Here comes your first tourist packet boat for the season. It was late afternoon now, and she heard music floating across the water as the sleek white boat drew closer. She ran to the rail and watched people who were lined up along the high rails of the other boat. Her mother came to the rail to watch with her. There were people sitting on chairs on the roof of the long cabin that ran the length of the middle of the boat. Men wearing striped dress jackets and straw hats leaned casually against the boat's supports. Their light-colored pants contrasted with the bright colors of the gowns that the women standing next to them wore. Sarah stared at the beautiful dresses and elaborate hats. Some of the women held parasols to protect them from the sun. As she waved to them, some of them waved back. The packet boat was as long as the Fairchild One, and its enclosed cabin was much longer than theirs. The space her father used for hauling freight was devoted to making the passengers comfortable. Where do they sleep, Mama? Are there cuddies for their beds inside that cabin like in ours? Abigail smiled. That is a good question. Your father says that it is a big problem. There is not enough space for individual bedrooms if they haul enough people to make money for the boat's owners. Some of the owners hang hammocks, and they can be pretty tricky to get into. Some of them spread mattresses out on the floor of the cabin after meals are served. It must get pretty hot in there in the late summer. You mean that everyone sleeps in one room? The men and the women? Sarah was shocked. Her mother laughed. I would guess that they hang curtains between the men and the women's quarters. I really don't know, though. If many of those men snore like Pa does sometimes, it certainly must get pretty noisy, Sarah chuckled. Her mother looked thoughtful as they watched the boat proceed down the canal. I don't know how much longer the packet boats will keep operating. Now that the trains are running from the city to the Adirondacks, a lot of people are going that way. I think the fact that they get so filthy from the coal dust that drives the trains makes packet boating the better way to travel. But the trains keep improving and they may take business away from water travel. I noticed that the railroad tracks seem to run right along a lot of the same paths that the canal follows. Sarah frowned. The trains sure make an awful racket when they get close to us. Sometimes it scares the mules. Yes, that is true. Your papa is a little worried about the trains taking some of his freight business. Her mother sighed. You mean that we wouldn't tow down the canal anymore? Sarah was dismayed. That won't happen for a long time. Don't worry about it. Her mother started back towards the cabin. Let's get set up for supper. They tied up that night just a mile from Schenectady. Tomorrow we will be spending the day going through the locks that take us past Cahos. Abigail, I may be needing your help at the wheel. The captain yawned wearily. Why? What is going to happen, Papa? Sarah was puzzled. Probably nothing. It is just that the Cahos Falls are pretty tough. When we reach Crescent, just a short ways from there, we pass across an aqueduct that takes us across the Mohawk River and around the falls to Cahos. You will see all the mills along the shore because the water gives them the power to run their machinery. The woolens and the cotton for your dresses are manufactured there. Your father lost one of his friends in an accident while he was logging through here a few years ago, Mama said quietly. He is always glad to put this stretch behind him. Sarah went to bed in the little nook that the canaller called their cuddy, and she was eager for the next day to come. Chapter 8. Another Bank Robbery. Sarah jumped ashore before they entered each of the 16 locks and watched her uncle's boat follow them through. At each lock, her father seemed to meet someone he had met before on the canal. There was so much canal traffic that they had to wait their turn in several of the locks. By late afternoon, she was becoming bewildered by all of the new people they had seen that day. She and Jack stood with a man named Max at the last lock they would have to go through today. He was a short, wiry little man who fascinated her as he accurately spit a stream of tobacco juice into a black metal spittoon about 5 feet away from him on the dock. Her father had pointed him out as they came to the lock, and when she went ashore, he introduced himself to her and Jack. I know both of your paws. He wiped his chin on the back of his gnarled hand. I've been a canaller for many a year, but I never heard of the shenanigans we are seeing this year. What are she faltered, not remembering the rest of the word. What goings on, he explained with a gap-toothed grin. Ain't you heard about the bank robberies? We have been hearing about robberies back along the canal in the cities we passed, Jack nodded. You had robberies down this way too? You bet. I heard we had a big one in Schenectady just this morning. He shook his head. And the police tells me the thief got clean away again, I hear there has been at least 6 robberies in the past 2 weeks, and no one comes close to catching anyone." His voice was almost admiring as he admitted how clever this thief was. "I will bet it is the same man who robbed the banks in Utica and Herkimer when we went through there," Sarah said excitedly. "Did you hear what the robber looked like?" "Yep, the bank manager said it was a big red-headed fellow with a beard. He got in before the bank opened and the manager was alone." "The robbery in Schenectady. When did that happen? Mike went ashore there when we went through the lock, and he didn't mention hearing about it." "Real early in the morning. Got in before the bank opened and made off with a bundle of money." "Let's ask Mike if he heard about it." Sarah quivered with excitement. Jack nodded eagerly, and they ran back to the towpath where Mike was standing with the mules. "Mike, did you hear about a robbery back in Schenectady this morning when you went into town?" Sarah was breathless as she skidded to a stop beside him. He frowned and yanked Minnie's bridle a bit viciously. "Yeah, I did hear something about robbery. Didn't pay too much attention to it. Your pa was waiting on me to get started again." He yanked Minnie's halter again, so hard that her feed bag tipped. She backed away from him, braying loudly. "We were just talking to that man." Sarah pointed back to where Max stood talking now to her father. "His name is Max, and he knows Papa. He says there has been 6 bank robberies, and he had never heard of such shenanigans." She was thrilled with the new word she had just learned. "That means goings-ons," she explained loftily. Mike didn't seem too interested. He yanked Minnie's feed bag off completely, and the mule reached over, nipping at him. He slapped at her muzzle, and she pulled her head back from his range, rolling her eyes and stamping her feet. Sarah tried not to giggle. Minnie really does not like him, and I don't blame her. "It seems like they are going to New York City just like us." Jack looked thoughtful. He wanted to tell Mike to stop being so rough with the mules, but he didn't quite dare. Sarah felt a chill go down her spine. "Do you think the robber is really going to New York City too?" "No, I don't," Mike snarled. "New York's a far piece from here. Most likely these robberies are being made by different men." He yanked the feed bags off from the other 2 feeding mules. "You 2 had better get on board. Looks like we are ready to move." "He never pays any attention to what we tell him," Sarah complained as she led Minnie towards the loading plank. "I don't like him. I'm going to tell Pa how rough he is with the animals." Jack's face was grim as they started up the ramp. That's it for today's story time, friends. Please come back tomorrow and we will continue with Minnie the Mule and the Erie Canal.